So this comment popped up in a very generic video about the power and control dynamics of abuse. What it is, outlining the patterns and the common beliefs that fuel abuse. This is widely accessible information available on any DV site. I just summed it up concisely as I like to do so that people who are in abusive dynamics can spot it. So I do find it a little strange that you're questioning my credentials when it doesn't take a psychology degree to understand and identify the patterns of abuse. For the record, I do have master's level training in psychology. Sadly, I was halfway through my master's degree when I had to make a choice between completing my degree or feeding my child. So I chose the latter. But coupled with nearly 20 years of therapy and self-reflection work, I do think that I'm knowledgeable on various aspects of psychology. But I have never and would never claim to be a professional. Anyways, back to this. I really don't think this was a genuine question because you've popped up on a couple different videos in an attempt to discredit my perspective. But again, I find this really strange because we should be educating people about the signs of abuse so that they can remove themselves from these toxic situations. So why would somebody question my credentials when I'm just sharing information that's widely accessible? Here is one hypothesis. Deflection through the credentials fallacy. BetterHelp defines deflection as this: the act of blaming another person for your own mistakes or shortcomings, rather than accepting the blame or criticism yourself. People deflect because they don't want to feel bad about themselves. It's a defense mechanism that's closely related to projection but has subtle differences. Projection occurs outside of our awareness. We don't always know when we're doing it, but deflection is deliberate. It happens when we don't want to own up to our own shortcomings, because at the root of deflection is denial. People often deflect when they can identify with something, but they don't want to own up to it. So instead of sitting with and dissecting their discomfort, they deflect either to someone or something else, and in this case, it's my credentials. Which brings us to the credentials fallacy. The credentials fallacy is a logical fallacy that happens when somebody dismisses your argument by stating that whoever made it doesn't have the proper credentials, so their argument must be wrong. This fallacy focuses on the origin of the argument and not the argument itself. My credentials would be relevant to the argument if I was trying to diagnose someone, but since I was just describing a pattern of behavior, asking for my credentials just falls under genetic fallacy. This is also an ad hominem attack, which is a personal attack on the person making the argument, in this case, me. It's almost as though you don't want me to educate people on the patterns of abuse. Why would somebody want this? Someone who identifies with the patterns of abuse because they engage in it but aren't quite ready to own up to it, living in denial, and will often pass the buck at any means necessary. I completely understand how uncomfortable it is when we can identify that our behavior sucks and is hurtful. But questioning my credentials when I'm just describing patterns of behavior that can be found on every single DV website or educational material just makes you look silly. You don't have to agree with the definition of abuse, but these are the definitions. And we need to bring awareness to it so that the people who don't own up to their abusive behavior can no longer gaslight the people around them.